Bienvenue everyone to the Eternal City, Rome, Italy. Today is our very first episode out of 12 of the mysteries of the Eternal City, and we're going to visit the area of the Pantheon and the crimes of Rome, from a notorious painter that was involved in very illicit activities on the run, to the man who changed Rome and empire forever. We'll find all about that as we walk around this beautiful city. Let me know where you're watching from, and let me know, have you been to Rome before? So we are looking right at one of the most magnificent buildings, I would say, in the entire world, the Pantheon. And we're going to learn all about this building, go inside, and then walk around this area to see beautiful paintings. We're going to also see ancient Roman ruins, and we're going to learn about some Italian opera. Hello everyone, buongiorno. I'm Ariel with Urbanist, and let's walk around in this beautiful Eternal City. I've been wanting to do Rome ever since day one of Urbanist. As you know, I've covered a lot of New York City. Many of you may know me as the New York City history person, the person who takes you all around that beautiful city that never sleeps. However, from day one, I always saw Urbanist as a worldwide show. That's why I didn't call it the New York Urbanist or New York City history. I called it Urbanist because Urbanists travel all around the world. And Rome has always been my number one city that I wanted to cover. And finally, I am here taking all of you for 12 whole days on a daily basis through the mysteries of this eternal city. Let's walk around into the Pantheon without further ado. Hello, Lou. You're having lunch for your mom's birthday and you're watching me in the sunshine. Oh, amazing. I hope you're doing well. Happy birthday to your mom. Everyone press hearts for Lou's mom. Hello, Helga. Hello, Ellen. Hello, Lily. You love Rome. Hello, Rocky. Hello, Kay. That's one of your favorite areas of Rome. Likewise, I absolutely love this area. Hello, Tuba. Doing well. Hello, Roy. You went to the Pantheon back in 1995, and you'll be here in a week on Monday as well. Why Rome? Why number one? Well, after New York City, Rome was my number one because literally everywhere in this city, you bump into history. We are right now in the center of Rome, and the center of Rome is about probably 4 or 5 arrondissements. In Paris is probably the size half of Manhattan. And as you walk around this area of Rome, you bump into history everywhere, every corner. You don't need even a map. You don't even need Google Maps or GPS. You can just walk around and boom, you're there seeing 2,000 years of history. That's why I've always wanted to go to Rome, and I'm so happy to be here. So we're looking at the Pantheon. Now the Pantheon is much older than it looks. If you are the tourist who hasn't even read any history, I don't blame you for maybe thinking that the Pantheon is some Renaissance building, because the Pantheon looks a whole lot like many governmental buildings all around the US, like the New York Supreme Court building. Also looks like many other buildings all around Europe. London has many buildings like it, but this probably inspired them all. Now from the outside, it's already monumental, but wait until we go inside. Hello, Eliza. This is wonderful that you'll be in Rome for 12 days. Look forward to your Facebook Live programs. Hello, Cindy. Nice to see you here. And my first video you seen was when I was in Spain. Oh, yes. So up here we see M. Agrippa, LF, etc. Agrippa is the main name right there. Marcus Agrippa. However, this confused historians for many, many centuries. Because if you have a huge name on top of it, Roman emperors weren't shy of their ambitions. They loved to showcase what they built. But Marcus Agrippa never built this Pantheon. Marcus Agrippa was one of the closest confidants of Emperor Augustus, the very first Roman emperor, which we're going to learn how he rose to becoming the first Roman emperor. But this was built by Emperor Hadrian, also known as one of the 5 good emperors of Roman Empire. Now, Emperor Hadrian was alive during 100 AD, and in 125 AD, Emperor Hadrian was obsessed with architecture. So much so that one of the top architects in the Roman Empire actually disliked Hadrian's ambitions to be an architect. Hadrian went to this very famous architect and sent him the plans of a building that would be the new Pantheon of Rome. Now, what is a Pantheon? Well, you can tell by the words. Pan, which means all or across, and Theon or Theos, which means God or gods. This is the monument to all the gods of Rome. So Hadrian showed these plans to that architect, and the plaza was much larger, about twice the size of this one, a little bit lower actually. So when we will be facing the Pantheon, it will actually look much higher to our perspective. The architect looked at those plans, he was like, it's a bit too low, it could be a little bit higher. I don't like the ceiling, looks kind of plain. Hadrian absolutely disliked that because it deeply pained him. He loved architecture, and he decided to punish the man and imprison him. Luckily, that architect who dared to go against the word of the emperor did not take up this job. Hadrian ended up hiring another team of architects who ended up working with him through many other projects all around ancient Rome. So by 125 AD, the Pantheon was constructed. Yep, it's that old. Let's go inside. Pantheon, yes, a Greek word. Thank you, Lou. I know you know you're Greek, or can at least understand Greek because you're from Cyprus. Hello, Denise. Okay, everyone, brace yourselves. I'm not going to talk too much as we're walking through. All right, let's go inside. Everyone, brace yourselves. This is the entrance to the Pantheon. Now, from the outside, it looks like every other building across the Western world. But we are greeted immediately with these huge iron doors. These doors are the oldest doors you can find fully intact from ancient Rome, or at least metal doors, and one of the largest doors fully intact from the ancient era in the entire world. These are called the Doors of Hadrian. Oh, wow. So right above, we're looking at the oculus, the opening on top of the Pantheon, and no, it's not covered in glass. That is a fully open dome here in Rome. Coffers all around. The sun shines right through it. Today, it's a pretty cloudy day, so we're not going to see the sunspot, but the Pantheon almost acts like an entire huge, massive, spherical sundial. Now, why did the Pantheon survive for so long, and especially fully intact? Well, it's because it was later adopted by the Christian religion pretty early on and made into a temple for the Virgin Mary, and they called this Santa Maria Rotunda. Now, it's kind of funny if you translate directly into English, which would translate to Saint Mary the Rotund, but does not mean that Mary was rotund, unlike, another religious figure like the Buddha is depicted rotund. No, it just means that is a round building. Helga, it's amazing. Oh, yes, it is. Kathy, hope you're enjoying my time in Rome. Oh, I definitely am. 307 in Rome, good afternoon. So many ruins you can dig and find some ancient ruins. That's what happens with Romans all the time as they are living here. They just bump into ancient ruins as they dig further into their homes. So immediately we can see, even with the camera, that the field of view of the Pantheon is perfectly aligned to our field of view from our eyes. So this is a building very much of the human scale. Unlike the monument architecture that we saw of Victor Emmanuel yesterday, and the other ones we're going to see soon, the EUR made by Benito Mussolini, those type of architecture that was built after 1900 was meant to make you feel small. But back in ancient Roman times, this was meant to make you feel divine, connected to the heavens above. Even before the age of Christianity, since this was the Pantheon, it was meant to make you feel like you were communicating with the Roman gods themselves. Now, if you were to take a perfect sphere, you can fit it right inside here of the Pantheon. Perfect sphere could fit right in the middle of the Pantheon, which is very unusual for a building. But how did they build a dome this big? Because this dome is larger in diameter than the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. It's the largest unreinforced dome in the entire world. How did Hadrian do this? Well, Hadrian might have been a lover of architecture and might have been a great amateur architect, but he wasn't a genius mathematician, nor was he a genius engineer on his own. He had a very great team, and their team figured something out. Because the Romans, a few decades earlier, started mastering the art of concrete. Concrete, a new invention in the Western world, made construction much easier. Rome went from using mostly brickwork to making these magnificent, huge buildings out of poured concrete. Hello, Girolamo. Fai conosce la Calabria agli americani? I do know of Calabria, but I won't be going to Calabria this trip. Maybe someday. What happens if it rains? Well, it's open all the time. Rain, snow, hail, thunderstorm, global apocalypse, it'll still be open. And there is a little trick to make sure it doesn't flood. It's right here. There's 22 drainage holes throughout the middle of the Pantheon. And the floors do get wet, so the drainage is not so efficient, but the entire Pantheon won't flood. And let's go on directly underneath and look up. So here we see a circle enclosed in the square. Doesn't appear to be. I haven't seen a bird in here at all, but I don't think we're in peak bird season. Rome is overrun with birds around March, so I don't know how it is here in March. So how did they build this then? Well, concrete. But the thing is, if you pour this with the same concrete all the way to the top, the entire thing will collapse. That wouldn't be good at all, especially standing here. And I'm standing here nearly 2,000 years later, and it doesn't look like it's about to fall. It looks actually pretty steady. Well, they did two things. One, they used different types of concrete as they went higher. They did it in three different sections. Right there, and then the top. The first section had very heavy rocks. The second section had a little bit lighter rocks. They're kind of like similar to like the stuff you find nearby marble mountains. And then the top actually had basalt. Now, basalt is volcanic rock found by nearby Mount Vesuvius. We're going to learn why basalt ended up being very deadly to the residents who lived nearby Pompeii for one of our episodes of Mysteries of Eternal City. But just so you know, for this episode, at the very top is very lightweight concrete. And it's able to actually withstand the weight. Now, they also built buttresses on the outside of the Pantheon, which we'll take a look at later. Now, one thing you should realize is these are not aligned. Why are these windows not aligned? It's actually done in a way to make you bring attention to the dome. As I mentioned, this is kind of a place to feel like you're connected with the divine. The divine might have not been the best word to use in ancient Roman mythology, but more connected with the gods. So it's unaligned, so you can bring attention to the rest. Now, these coffers are very interesting, and they actually help distribute the weight of the dome above. And yes, terracotta was among some of the stones used, I think, in the second section. So that's how this magnificent structure is still standing to this day. Marvelously so, 2,000 years. Now, once you've been here in the Pantheon, now that you've seen this video in great detail of the Pantheon, you'll start seeing this type of structure everywhere. As I mentioned, New York Supreme Court building looks like a Pantheon. Many buildings in Washington, D.C., including Jefferson's Memorial, looks like the Pantheon. And you can probably name dozens of different buildings in Paris, London, and many other cities around the world. If you know of any, let me know in the comments. So there's three very interesting people buried here, because they tie into two different future episodes that we're going to cover. The first is a couple that inspired one of the greatest dishes to have graced the earth, the Margherita Pizza. So yeah, the coffers did have gilded rosettes on it. They took them out, I think, right after the Catholic Church took control of this structure. So right here we have Umberto I and Margarita the Savoy buried right here, entombed right here. Now, Margarita the Savoy, you might recognize her from multiple pizza history videos I've done in New York City. And you're going to learn about the pizza history in Naples when I visit as well. Margarita the Savoy inspired the Margherita Pizza, which is the colors of the Italian flag. And they're entombed right here. But right next to Margarita is probably one of the top 3 famous painters of all the Renaissance of Rome. We're going to learn about we're going to learn about 3 other painters, so out of 4, we're going to learn about 3. The first one we're going to learn about is Raphael, who's entombed right here. Raphael painted the Pope apartments in Vatican City. You're going to see that tomorrow. And also, he had a very terrible feud with Michelangelo, who is the painter of the Sistine Chapel. I work in the Minnesota Judicial Center, says Donna, where our Supreme Court is housed. The building looks like the Pantheon. Yep. Oh, cool. Thank you for letting us know. And Linda, you say this tour of Rome is amazing. Oh, I'm so happy. I show you a lot. This is going to be a pretty epic video because we have a few stops more. So let me show you quickly a little bit more of the Basilica. Here's the Basilica of Santa Maria at Martus. Jesus on the cross. Huge, beautiful columns. And one more time, the majesty of the domes.
Second.
And there we go. Oh, there we go. Yes. Yes. Oh, look at that. Oh, thank God for the sun. Or should I say thank gods for the sun. Helios has come. So the Pantheon is free to enter. They used to enforce silence, but I think since it's not a holy day, they are not enforcing silence. So you can come in here at your leisure. It's free all throughout the day and open until 7 p.m. And we have a few other people buried here. But now, let's go outside to learn about a painter that was on the run, a painter that was inspired by Raphael. This painter came after the era of Raphael, after the Renaissance period, and started the Baroque period. Let's go to St. Luigi de Francis. All right, let's go back through the doors. I'm going to touch these doors. Please don't tell anyone. Let's touch the doors of Hadrian. Wow. So these columns over here are one single piece. They're not cut up into sections like most columns in the Greek world. These were imported from Egypt, all in one single piece. Sorry for the technical difficulties. It's out of my control, but sometimes that happens in Facebook. I think it might be because there was low service in the Pantheon, but let's go outside of the Pantheon and venture out into the streets of Rome to head to our second location out of four in total. Horses outside. This is called Della Rotonda. It was named after the Catholic name for the Pantheon. And we'll look at the backside of the Pantheon in a bit. But first, let's go to Sant Luigi de Francis, or St. Louis the French. So George, you tell us that the originals were supposed to be taller. That's crazy. I didn't know that. That is amazing. Why I love Facebook Live. And George is a sculptor, so he knows his stuff about building materials. If you know anything else about the building materials of the Pantheon, let us know. Now, here's one of about 32-ish different obelisks imported from Egypt here in Rome. The ancient Romans loved bringing Egyptian obelisks over here way before the Western powers brought their own obelisks to cities like New York, Paris, and London. They each have only one or two obelisks. Rome has 32. All right, let's continue down this way. Look at the beautiful streets of Rome. Rocky, you say two people that you know are in Rome right now and you're looking for them? Well, I hope I randomly bump into them and you see them on video. Hey Denise, happy that you can catch me live on time. Amazing. Every day, same time for 12 days. And then plus other random Facebook Lives. I just love the streets of Rome, cobblestones. We're kind of walking through the same type of street plans that you would see in ancient Rome 2,000 years ago. But of course, a lot of these buildings are much newer, dating back to about 1600s. Here it is, ladies and gentlemen, St. Louis of France. I'm hoping it's open. Okay. Yeah, it's open. Good. So this is the National Roman Catholic Church of France in Rome. It's quite a mouthful. I'm not entirely sure if the other countries have their own national churches in Rome, but France does. France, as many of you know, has had a very long history with Italy. The French, for quite a while, wanted to have the Pope based in Avignon, including the namesake of this church, St. Louis IX. Now, St. Louis IX we learned about in Paris. St. Louis IX wasn't quite so saintly. He was very notorious. He actually ended up chastising his wife because she had sex with him. I don't know, it doesn't make sense to me. He was that pious. And also he severely punished many of his servants physically. So St. Louis IX, not so saintly. But let's walk inside the church and we'll learn about a painter that definitely wasn't saintly at all. I'm not sure. I'll show you the shop soon. Okay, everyone, brace yourselves. We're about to see one of the most famous painters of all Italian history. This painter changed art for good. He started the Baroque period after the Renaissance painters like Raphael and Michelangelo painted divine figures filled with light and color. Caravaggio went dark and dramatic. There we go. Look at that. So this is the painting of the hour. Jesus Christ pointing his finger at St. Matthew. They're all dressed in the modern, in the contemporary Renaissance fashion, but it's depicting a very biblical scene of Jesus calling St. Matthew. St. Matthew used to be a money man, a money lender. And the interesting thing about the Baroque is that Jesus is completely covered in shadow. Caravaggio was very poignant with his colors, painting the blackest of blacks that have been seen ever since that time in art history. Now, a few of the money lenders, one of them is actually kind of surprised. We have Matthew kind of pointing himself, saying, "Who, me? Am I really a chosen one?" And Jesus, without any kind of hint of emotion or hint of anything, he just points at Matthew, kind of with this full certainty. And the two money lenders in the back are not even paying attention at all, kind of showing that some people are a little bit more further spiritually developed than others. St. John the Baptist is the one who's covering Jesus. I think this is probably one of the most kind of poignant images of Jesus, because since he's covered in shadow and you kind of barely see him, it kind of seems more magical of a character in this painting. And here we have two other Caravaggio paintings. Now this one is very dramatic. So, as I mentioned, the Renaissance was kind of very light and divine and transcendent. Beautiful landscapes, usually very flat and tabula rasa style. But Baroque ended up being very dramatic, kind of in your face, almost as if there was a camera lens that was kind of going right into the action. So this is more Renaissance style, right here, and that's Baroque. Renaissance, Baroque. You know what they say, don't fix it if it ain't Baroque. So Caravaggio painted these very dramatic images that were dark, shadowy, also filled with kind of this angst. Well, I think it reflected a whole lot of Caravaggio's life, because Caravaggio, towards the end of his life, was on the run. One of his very final paintings, or his definite final painting, was of St. John the Baptist's head, decapitated, held by a person. However, the likeness of the head was not some made-up version of St. John the Baptist. The likeness of the head was his own, Caravaggio's own face on that decapitated head. I'm not entirely sure where this painting is located. I'm not sure if it's even on view. It's very gruesome. But why did Caravaggio paint his decapitated head? Well, it's because he was on the run. He had a bounty on his head. If his head was brought over but in the basket over to the Pope, they would be given a reward. Caravaggio murdered a man in cold blood, carrying an illegal sword. He ran away to Malta, tried to become a knight in the Maltese order, and the Maltese order really loved Caravaggio and kind of forgot all the murder ordeal because some of the members themselves came from very dark backgrounds. And he became a knight. But becoming a knight wasn't going to save Caravaggio. So in haste, he started painting his final work, the decapitated head, in his own likeness, in order to gift it to the Pope. If the Pope couldn't get it, he was trying to get it to the Borghese family. The Borghese family was one of his top patrons, and he was hoping that at least they would get their hands on it so they can bring him to the Pope. So Caravaggio, bringing the painting along with him, down along the coast of Calabria, up towards Naples, tried to catch a boat to Rome. However, the boat never came. Caravaggio tried to go on foot. The thing is, with that coast of Italy, it's very swampy and very hot. No shade. Caravaggio, carrying this heavy painting of a decapitated head, ran and ran and ran until he fully collapsed. He died at 39 years old, on the run, trying to not give his physical head because he did not want to die, he wanted to live, trying to give his head in a painting. Would that have convinced the Pope? Who knows? But Caravaggio, very controversial figure, painted those paintings in there, and it's no wonder that they were filled with so much drama because he himself lived a life filled with drama. There's another painter that lived a life filled with drama. However, luckily, this contemporary to Caravaggio led a very different life. Let's learn about Bernini. Let's go to Plaza de Minerva.
Ah sì, questa chiesa l'ha mai vista? A Piazza San Luigi dei Francesi? Qualcosa di spettacolare.
Good morning, Christine. Looks like the Romans were better builders than the Greeks. So yeah, the Romans actually were very great at construction. They innovated concrete. They also used a lot of marble. And also, they didn't do like a very elaborate city design, but they did a good enough city design that this ancient city was able to sustain a population of 1 million people. For context, there was no other European city that surpassed that until London in the First Industrial Revolution. So it took nearly 1,600, 700-ish years. And George, yeah, that was 3 Caravaggios in one, amongst some of his most famous paintings. We might be able to see Sic Bacchus also. And Donna, you're not religious, but that almost brought you to tears. And Italian architecture is the best. And hello, Wood Crafter, welcome. And he sounds like a nut job. I think you're referring to Louis IX. Yeah, indeed, Louis IX was a very eccentric fellow. All right, let's go to Plaza de Minerva. Oh, I'm cutting out a lot. Oh, that's a shame. I will be posting an HD version of this video afterwards. Hola Ana, bienvenidos a Doma. Estamos ahora explorando la área del Panteón. We're exploring the area of the Pantheon.
Noi con delle idee, però.
So here we're seeing the backside of the Pantheon. You can see that there used to be buttresses attached to the Pantheon. They were removed shortly after the construction, and that's why it's still an unreinforced dome, larger in diameter than St. Peter's Basilica. Almost taller than St. Peter's as well. Almost as tall. Okay, so let me show you. Thank you, George, for pointing that out. And the great thing is, you don't really get a sense of the immensity of this building until you go inside. We have a lot of gelaterias all around. Lots of stores around here. So brace yourselves for one of the strangest sculptures outdoors in Rome, built by a contemporary of Caravaggio, another man who innovated Baroque architecture, painting, and a few other forms, including sculpture. His name is Bernini, and Bernini also was a man who rose to fame very quickly. Like Caravaggio, very early in age, in his early 20s, and fame got to his head. So much so that he flaunted all his fame and wealth. He slept with many, many different women, and also he had a very strong fight with his own brother that almost led to murder. But first, let me show you the very strange sculpture that's right in front of me. It's kind of, you see at first glance, you might think, oh, that's weird. But then you look at it, it's like, wait a minute, what's happening here? Here is Bernini's elephant in the obelisk. There's a cross on top. It's an Egyptian obelisk with some hieroglyphics. And a elephant. What's happening here? Eliza, it's so interesting to see the juxtaposition of Psycho advertising next to the ancient Pantheon and gelato, and alleyways of how they're preserved with the buildings surrounding it. Yeah. Rome is very well preserved. There's something about Rome. It's a very old city. It's 2,000 years old, but still feels really vibrant. And despite it being very old and all these buildings dating back to 1500s, 1600s, somehow the city still feels like fresh. It's hard to explain, but it feels fresh, which I can't say for some other cities that tend to be around the same age. So what's the meaning of this elephant in the obelisk? Well, Bernini was kind of playing like a slide joke on the Romans of that time. Of course, the Roman Catholic Church controlled most of Italy, Peninsula, and most of Europe overall. And there was kind of a lot of this belief of connecting the grounded earth, in essence, kind of the blood of Christ, and connecting with the heavens above, the divinity of in each and every one of us. The elephant at that time was the symbolism of groundedness, of our earthly selves. Also, it was a symbol of piety in terms of our own sexuality. Because the elephants, according to what they studied at that time, found out that they only mated once every 5 years. And for some reason, the Catholic Church thought that was a very good example for them to lead. Bernini is playing a joke on kind of the Catholic Church because Bernini, he was a man who loved love. He loved to live on the edge, similar to Caravaggio. However, Caravaggio was nowhere near as charismatic as Bernini. Bernini, while Caravaggio let fame go to his head, no one really liked him. He was really angry all the time. But Bernini let fame go to his head, but he was very well liked. Everyone loved him. He was very popular with the Romans and also with the women, the high class of the city. So Bernini is kind of saying a sly, oh yeah, I love to love. And I'm staying close to earth while allowing some divinity into my life. How they lowered the obelisk without breaking those marble corners. You know what? That's actually one of the mysteries of Rome, ancient Rome. No one really knows how they transport these very heavy obelisks. This one is much smaller than the other ones. There's some obelisks that are twice larger than the one we saw in New York City, Cleopatra's Needle. Those obelisks are 5 tons heavy. To move something 5 tons heavy, even with current day technology, is very difficult. You would need these huge cranes. However, somehow the Romans did it. No one really knows for sure. Of course, there are theories. Right in front of us, we have another church in this Plaza de Minerva. And this church, unfortunately, is closed. But this church was the church where Galileo had his trial for committing heresy against the Catholic Church after claiming that the earth was not the center of the universe, that the sun was. He was charged over here. However, right next to the side of this church are some interesting plaques that really show that Rome was an ever-changing city. It might be called the Eternal City, but it was also eternally changing because of the virulent river Tiber that tend to flood and change shapes. This is the plaques that mark all the floods that happen. The latest of these plaques date back to the 1500s, but the earliest are more than 2,000 years old. And they say the exact date that the river Tiber flooded. And they also mark the water line. Now, I don't know if it's fully accurate, but you can imagine that the water line at least went up to here. So you can imagine this area of Rome, which is amongst the lowest areas of Rome. It's kind of like in a little valley in the middle of the city, got flooded to this point over here. So Venice is not the only Italian city that suffered through flooding. However, luckily Rome, they end up walling up the river Tiber, so they avoided many of those issues. Oh, Wilma, you have to be there with your husband soon. Yes. I hope you enjoy it when you come. Hello, Gwen. Based on the Pantheon, big dome of cathedral in Florence was built by the same architects. Yeah, Michelangelo was inspired by the Pantheon dome as well. Okay, so now we learned about Caravaggio, we learned about Bernini. We're going to continue learning more about them as we continue going to all these other beautiful places in Rome in these next 11 episodes of Mysteries of the Eternal City. However, there was a opera writer who also got very popular very early in age. Probably actually same exact age as Caravaggio. Caravaggio got very famous at 23. This same opera writer got very famous at 23 and wrote an opera called The Barber of Seville. Now, this opera is one of the most famous operas now known today. I actually listened to it yesterday and I was absolutely blown away. But the first time this opera premiered, it premiered under very auspicious circumstances. And right next to this opera house that we're going to visit is also the very place where the Roman Republic was transformed into the Roman Empire. Let's go to Largo de Argentina and Teatro Argentina. George, you are right, you know your opera, Rossini. Sometimes you see the dates of the buildings on the side. You know what? I really love that opera too. I listened to it yesterday. Just wait till the story because you'll find how funny the story matches with the very first overture of the Barbers of Seville. And here we are, very close to our final stop on this episode of Mysteries of the Eternal City. I decided to call it a series just to make it feel a little bit more monumental. And I realized as I was researching the history of the city, I realized that there's so many connections here. We're gonna keep learning about all these characters we mentioned today, all these historical figures that we mentioned today. They're gonna connect to Vatican City, to the Villa Borghese, and all these other places. So that's why I'm calling this a series of 12 episodes, because in order to kind of get the full picture, you have to see all 12 episodes. So let's find the crosswalk. And if you're tuning in, let me know where you're watching from, and if you want to lend your support to Urbanist, I'll say this now before I finish up with these stories. You can click the link in the comments. Think of it as giving me a tip for these videos. I provide to you, all of you, for free. However, I do have costs I incur on these videos, like data, transportation, and also the cost of going to these attractions. So if you want to lend your support, you can click the link down below. And also there's other ways to support. If you want to leave a one-time contribution, you can do so by going to paypal.me/Ariel Vieira. Also, the link is in the description of this video. And lastly, the other way you can contribute to Urbanist, helping it grow, is letting your friends and family and people on Facebook know about this video. By spreading it around, we get more people watching live. Let's go to Teatro Argentina, which actually was built on top of the Theater of Pompeii. But the Theater of Pompeii, we'll leave that for last. First, let's talk about the Barbers of Seville, right here at the Teatro Argentina. Veronica, you're from Utah and you're loving this. Amazing, Veronica. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, Michelle. Nice to see you here. Here we are at Teatro Argentina. Those trees are characteristic of Rome. Yes, these trees are characteristic of Rome. We'll learn about them soon. So this theater played many of the top Italian opera, actually, not just Italian, but many of the European opera singers and writers during the 1700s. From the 1700s all the way to about the mid-1800s, opera was the biggest deal. It was huge. Everyone wanted to see an opera. Everyone wanted to be famous as an opera singer or writer or composer. One of those young men who had a strong ambition to be one of the most famous opera writers in all of Europe was Rossini. And Rossini decided to adapt another opera from a man who was already 75 years old by the early 1700s. That opera was called The Barbers of Seville. Now, Rossini decided to make a comedic spin on The Barbers of Seville. And by doing this comedic spin, he upped the music, made it very lively and vibrant and kind of hilarious to listen to. And also it was a very wild show with a lot of different costume changes and wild sets. But the first night that The Barbers of Seville premiered, there was a cat, a feral cat, that actually snuck into the theater somehow and started walking across the stage. They tried to capture the cat during the show, not to interrupt the show, but the cat went bulge, and then they just flung the cat towards the audience. That wasn't the only thing that happened. The main opera singer, the main actor of this opera, The Barbers of Seville, actually fell down on the trapdoor while singing. He fell right on his nose and was profusely bleeding down his nose and kept on trying to sing nonetheless. The supporters of the other opera, the original one, who was a very well-established opera maestro on his own right, those fans were very displeased with this young opera writer, only 23 years old, trying to adapt the great. So they started going and hissing and booing at this young new opera writer, Rossini. This really pissed off Rossini. Rossini, he was a very confident man, and he thought that he wrote a masterpiece. Later on, we'll find out that it is a masterpiece because everyone listens to it. But at that time, Rossini was pissed off. He thought to himself, they hate this and they don't know what real opera is. So Rossini, apparently, according to legend, no one knows 100% if this is true, but there's many accounts of it, that he went onto the stage and started yelling at the audience after the opera was over because people were talking over it. The main singer was bleeding profusely. There was a cat thrown onto the audience. Who knows what happened to that audience member that caught the cat on his face? People fought back. They started hissing and booing at Rossini, chasing him out of the theater into the streets of Rome. Rossini luckily escaped. If you listen to the very first song in The Barbers of Seville, the overture, you'll hear how perfect that matches with that first night. Second night, Rossini, a little bit embarrassed of the night before, thinking that his new opera has gone to utter shit. No one's ever going to see it again. He's going to be canceled. The likes of Verdi would just overshadow him once again. He stayed at his hotel room nearby and paced in his room the entire night. His mom asked him, "Hey, are you going to the opera to see the second night?" And he told his mom, "No, they're going to hate it. I'm done for." And his mom comes back from the second showing. And as she's strutting back to the hotel room where Rossini was pacing back and forth, she told him, hey, you got to come to the theater. Rossini was scared to death because he didn't want to be chased out by an angry mob again. But he goes with his mother back to the Teatro Argentina. And people are giving Rossini a standing ovation. The people loved it. Maybe it was the press from the first night that people were very intrigued to see this comedy of errors. But people actually thought it was a magnificent opera. And it sold out every night after that. So much so that the Barbers of Seville is still one of the top operas all around the world, along with the likes of the Magic Flute and the many beautiful operas of Verdi, who also premiered here. Rossini ended up becoming a master opera writer, forever forged in history. However, this theater was built above another theater, the Theater of Pompeii. The Theater of Pompeii dates back to more than 2,000 years prior to Rossini. It was built in the honor of Pompey. But who was Pompey? Well, Pompey came this close to becoming the first emperor of Rome. Pompey kept gathering more and more wealth and power. He started building a huge theater right here at the Largo de Argentina. However, Pompey had competition because there was a man who wasn't going to let Pompey take the entire piece of the ancient Roman Empire. That man was Julius Caesar. And Julius Caesar teamed up with Pompey at first, knowing full well that Pompey, if left unsupervised, would take total control of Rome. Another man joined them, Crassus, and they end up making the first triumvirate. Julius Caesar, Pompey, and Crassus teaming up, taking total control of Rome. So much so that they were rigging the elections. They had a list of future consuls. Future consuls. That means they already knew who would win. Now, they didn't have total control yet because people would still win the elections who they did not expect. And also they didn't have the full influence of all the client kings of the outskirts of the Roman Empire. And there was the pesky Gauls towards the north of Italy, constantly attacking the northern border, annoying the Roman Republic to death. Crassus went out east to Parthia, tried to conquer the lands out east in order to gain favor because these three guys, one of them wanted to become total ruler. Crassus knew that if he won the war in the east, maybe he'll become the top person in Rome. Pompey went towards North Africa, tried to conquer more lands in North Africa. Pompey was a very good general, so he started winning a lot of battles. Crassus was not the best general. Crassus actually wasn't really known as being a really good soldier at all. He was a very good politician, very rich, but he didn't know how to war. So Crassus was killed in battle. This left two of the three of the triumvirate. Now Pompey and Julius Caesar weren't at each other's throats yet because Pompey was married to Julius Caesar's daughter. But Julius Caesar had to do something. Pompey was already capturing lands in North Africa. Julius Caesar decided to go up north towards Gaul. Little does he know that about 2 decades later, this will be a very important part of his life. Very pivotal moment in Roman history where everything changed. Let's take a look around and then I'll continue with the story. So this is the ruins of the Theater of Pompeii. Theater of Pompeii, before the Colosseum ever existed, was the biggest of the theaters built. Built kind of into the ground, as most theaters were before the Colosseum. Lynette, you love this tour. Thank you for sharing great history. Are those original tiled roofs? I don't know. I would say yes, they're original tiled roofs, but I'm not 100% sure. I would say yes. I would say there's a very good chance that it's the original tile roofs. Almost everything else here is original. The columns themselves, that brickwork down there. That bench is not original, never mind. Well, almost everything else is original here. Now, actually, just one quick aside back to Rossini. This right here, the Largo de Argentina, is a very cherished Roman ruin because things happen. We'll get to that soon. But why is it pretty empty? Why is there not that many tourists here compared to the Pantheon? I mean, there's a bit, but it's not like that heavily trafficked as the Trevi Fountain, as the Roman Forum, as the Colosseum. It's not that many people here. A lot of people actually don't know what happened here. Well, one of the reasons they haven't really allowed people to go in is because inside the Largo de Argentina is a feral cat colony filled with at least a few dozen cats, and maybe at some point in the past 100 years, hundreds. Benito Mussolini himself tried to change up this area and open it up to the public, but he couldn't because it was overrun with cats. Maybe one of those cats was the one that snuck into the theater of Argentina. So, Caesar, he went up north to Gaul. Now Caesar, well, he was no Crassus. Caesar was one of the most talented generals of all history. So much so, he inspired the likes of Napoleon, George Washington, countless other top leaders all around the world, both people that we see as heroes and people that we see as villains. Caesar started taking over area after area of Gaul. The Gaul was run by the Gallics or the Gaelics or the Celts. Go by different names. The Celts weren't really a unified people, but they were had very similar culture and mutually intelligible language, and also very similar kind of spiritual system. So he conquered each region after each region. Now, the reason why the Romans had such a tough time with Gaul and the Celts wasn't because they were some unified power. They weren't unified. It's that they were extremely numerous. They were filled with millions of people. Also, they tend to settle in areas that were really difficult to access. Maybe the woodlands of southern Germany or the Alps in southern France. They were really hard to get a hold of and take control of all of them. But Caesar somehow did. Caesar was merciless because he did not only kill the men. The Gallic women also fought in many battles. So Caesar also killed the women. But he didn't stop there. Caesar was also known for just burning down the entire villages and killing the children as well. It's estimated that Caesar might have killed anywhere between 7 million to maybe 10 million Celts. This wasn't a battle. This was not a war, unlike with the Parthians or Pompeii with the Egyptians. Caesar was committing genocide, almost a systematic killing of all the Celts above the Italian borders. Why? Well, at least in his eyes, it was the easiest thing he could do. The Celts were really hated in Rome. So much hated that deeper in ancient Roman history, the Celts went into the very foot of Rome's doors. They decapitated the ancient Roman kings and threw the heads right in the middle of those ancient Roman forum buildings. Caesar grew up looking at the faces of his own kin who fought those Celts centuries ago from the great Julia family. The reason he saw their faces was because he literally saw their faces. They were right there in the room called the Ancestor Room. Every major Roman family had an Ancestor Room where the actual faces of their kin was displayed for all their descendants to see, to look at them basically into their own eyes. So Caesar took over almost all of Gaul. So much so that he went all the way to Britain and crossed the English Channel, which at that time was known as the Ocean by the ancient Romans, this mysterious island covered in fog. Even Caesar himself conquered it. And Caesar was a very good writer as well. He was very good at making his own publicity because he wrote very long journals, usually in the third person, kind of making himself be the hero. And he would send back word to the Theater of Pompeii or the Roman Forum, and one of his squires would come and read it aloud of his ventures in Rome. Caesar to the Romans was more than a general. He was kind of an adventurer, a hero, a conqueror. But Caesar had to contend with Pompey because he got terrible news while in Gaul. Wilma, you say great umbrella tree. Ariel, what's the name of the trees behind me? I actually don't know yet, but they are very quintessential Roman, quintessential like Italian. I will be looking into that because we'll be crossing a bunch of these trees, but if anyone knows, let us know. Oh, here we see the cats. Green umbrella tree. Oh, thank you. No, that was the original level of ancient Rome. Theater of Pompeii was definitely built a little bit more into a slope. But yes, generally this general gradation was the level of Rome. Julius Caesar received news that his daughter passed away during childbirth. The child died too. Caesar was left without kin. Pompey was left without a wife or an heir to his wealth. That means Caesar and Pompey had no more connection to hold them to each other. So Caesar decided to make a move because Pompey was quickly gaining power. Pompey, during major arena fights in his own theater of Pompeii and the nearby Colosseum, started wearing victory regalia, which wasn't quite normal at that time. You usually wear your victory regalia if you're doing a march through Rome after a major victory. But he continued wearing it after that major march. Pompey also started gathering more power. He was named dictator. So he started taking total control of the government, supported by Cicero, who said that Pompey needed this power in order to help Rome defend its borders. But Julius Caesar didn't want to have any of it. He saw, and he was going to conquer. Crossed the Rubicon, which was kind of this little tiny brook that kind of marks the north part of Italy, really the original Roman border. Caesar crossed and battled Pompey. Pompey ventured out into Egypt, and in Egypt he was killed by Julius Caesar's men. The civil war was ended, and Julius Caesar became dictator. At first, dictator for a few months. Then dictator for 10 years. And then dictator in perpetua, which means dictator for life, for eternity. Or dictator in perpetuity. This really upset the senators of Rome. Rome at that time was a republic run by senators. And they were very worried that Julius Caesar was taking control. And they were coming towards Brutus, who was one of the closest confidants of Caesar. Now, Brutus was kind of a adopted kid of Julius Caesar. He groomed him for power. Brutus ran into issues with his family after they went against Caesar during the Civil War, but Caesar pardoned him. And he took him under his wing and gave him all the secrets that he was holding of all the senators, and also confided in him to take care of a lot of official governmental duties. So all these other senators kept going towards Brutus, asking them if they can join them in the effort to overthrow Caesar. But by overthrowing Caesar, they wanted to... sirens. By overthrowing Caesar, they wanted to not just imprison him. That would have not done so much good. Caesar had a whole lot of influence over not just the Roman Republic itself and its government, but also among the people. People loved Caesar, so it wasn't good enough to just imprison him. They aimed to kill him. And in March 15th, on the Ides of March 44 BC, Caesar was standing right there in the middle of the theater of Pompeii, coming towards the senators to discuss some official governmental business. One of them was getting pissed off, and Caesar was screaming at this senator. The other senators started gathering, whispering to each other, gathering behind them. And one of them took out a knife and hit him on his neck. Now they were afraid, because Caesar is a world-renowned general, but not just a world-renowned general. Caesar was a huge man, very strong himself, and really known to be a very good fighter in hand-to-hand combat. They were scared of Caesar. So that very first blow was hesitant, and they hit him hesitantly, and Caesar wasn't really that terribly injured, so he turned around and looked all around him. And the senators came closer and closer and closer and stabbed him, one after the other, one in the arm, another one in the stomach. Caesar had only one weapon. It was a stylus, a huge pen. Despite having just a stylus, he fought back, and the senators were terrified and they stepped back, until Brutus came and hit Caesar right in the groin. Caesar looked at Brutus, and the Shakespeare version is Et tu, Brute. Now, Shakespeare knew his history, but he wasn't really making a historical, like a play based on full history. It's more kind of like the TV show Rome. It's not really full on history. So that is more of a made-up term. But according to some ancient sources, and again, no one knows this for sure, but many of the ancient sources started writing about Julius Caesar's death about 100 years later. They say that Caesar looked at Brutus and said, "You too, child?" Now, the reason he might have looked at Brutus, there's a few theories. He might have looked at Brutus and said, "You too, child," because he was utterly shocked that his own close confidant, the man he pardoned, took him under his wing, stabbed him, leading him to bleed profusely on the floor of the theater of Pompeii. The other theory is more interesting. Julius Caesar was known to have a very close relationship with the mother of Brutus. Some might think that Brutus was actually the son of Caesar. No one knows for sure whether he was the real son or he was more likely just the metaphorical son. Brutus still betrayed Caesar. And Caesar, once he knew that Even his close confidant betrayed him. He covered his face, not letting anyone know his final expression before he dies. And he laid face down on the theater of Pompeii, bleeding profusely and passing away. The great tyrant was dead, killed for good by the senators. This didn't bode well with the rest of the Roman Republic or the rest of the Roman people, because Julius Caesar had the favor of the army. He grew the army to a much larger size than it ever was. Caesar had the favor of new senators brought into Rome, senators to represent the new Gallic territories that he just conquered. And Caesar had the support of the people, saw him as the ultimate adventurer meets general. So the senators tried to run away from the theater of Pompeii, only to be greeted by huge crowds that were outside celebrating some Colosseum event that happened nearby. They had to sneak away and run towards the south of Italy, and some ran towards the north of Italy, including Brutus, who was later killed by the army of Mark Antony. This March 15th, 44 BC, was the end of the Roman Republic. Because after Mark Antony started trying to consolidate his forces, Julius Caesar left his will, all of his fortune, over to another young man who he took under his wing. His name was Octavian. And only 18 years old, Octavian was already a very sharp military leader and political maneuverer. He made himself look like the second coming of Caesar, because in a way he was the only man that Caesar trusted beyond Brutus. So Octavian killed Mark Antony's army. Mark Antony fled to Egypt, knew that was all over for him, and he and his lover Cleopatra committed suicide. Octavian took total control and became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome, all because the tyrant was murdered right here. Stay tuned. Tomorrow we're going to learn about how ancient Rome went from an empire to a Christian kingdom, to the very hearts of Christendom and the Roman Catholic religion at the Vatican Museum. From emperors to popes, this is the Eternal City. Thank you everyone so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. If you want to lend your support, click the link in the comments, or you could give a one-time contribution. Stay tuned tomorrow, same time, 3 p.m. Rome time, 9 a.m. New York City time. Keep being awesome and always keep on exploring. Arrivederci, everyone. Ciao, amici.